No particular order. We'll start with this question right here. Dear Rabbi, a friend of mine told me that her father spent most of his life studying Kabbalah. She told me how much influence numbers have on one's decision-making, especially when buying a home, or one's future health could be determined by the actual birth date. What is your opinion on this subject? So there's a general question here, and of course a detailed question. The general question is, what is my general opinion on, or I would say Judaism's opinion. I don't have an opinion myself, but Judaism's opinion on the influence of the numbers, birth dates, maybe other components of life on one's destiny, on one's life and on one's destiny, and particularly if numbers themselves also have this great influence. So let me start with the first general question. And it really is a discussion that is rooted in the Talmud, in the Tractate of Shabbat, whether we are shaped by what's called mazel, by luck, or by that which is beyond our control, by divine channels of light, or are we stronger than those channels of light? One example is astrology also, right? Does astrology influence us, influence our lives or not? The Talmud, in fact, first says that there are factors that do influence our lives. And like you point out here, for example, the day a person is born. If a person is born on a Sunday, he'll be either completely good or either completely bad. If he's born on a Monday, he'll be an angry person. If he's born on a Tuesday, he'll be either promiscuous or very wealthy. If he's born on a Wednesday, he'll be full of good deeds. If he's born on a Thursday, forget. Friday, he'll be a pursuer of mitzvot, and Shabbat, he'll be holy. These determinations of the Talmud are really based on the days of creation. Since the first day of creation is the day in which God created light and thereby darkness, you can either be, if you're born on a Sunday, you can either be full of light, good, or bad. Monday is when God separated the waters, and that separation is an act of tension, and therefore one who is born on Monday, as mentioned, will be angry. So these characteristics that are almost subscribed to people are based on the days of creation in which they were born. So on the one hand, in that Talmudic discussion, we find that yes, astrology does have influence on us. The days in which we are born does have influence on us. But what's interesting is the conclusion of that passage. That passage concludes by saying, Ein mazal Israel, that there is no mazel to the Jewish people. In other words, nothing can affect us. We are above that. So the reader is left with this enigma, because on the one hand, it says that yes, we are shaped by the days in which we are born, the days of the week in which we are born. On the other hand, it says that we're above that. So what is the Talmud trying to convey here? And the answer, I think, is very clear. And that is that if we want to confine ourselves to the limits of nature, then fine, let it be. Then we'll be influenced by nature. But if we want to use the power of our soul, which is again divine and therefore not limited by the boundaries of nature, to climb, to grow, to know that yes, we might be influenced by all sorts of forces, but we also are much stronger than those influences if we follow our divine calling, then that's a choice we can make too. And then nothing in the world will be able to influence us. It's almost evokes another passage from the Talmud that quotes the verse in Kohelet, in how do you say it in English? Kohelet. Help me out, Rabbi Eisen. What's the book? What's the name in English? Ecclesiastes? Ecclesiastes, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a famous verse there that says, Ein chadash tachat hashemesh. There's nothing new under the sun. So the Talmud says it's true, there's nothing new under the sun, but above the sun, much is new. What does that mean? And what it means is that if we're able to elevate ourselves and align ourselves really to a divine soul, then we'll be above the sun. Then we're not confined again to the laws of nature. And this is the answer to this question. On the one hand, yes, there are all sorts of things that influence us, including numbers, including birth dates, like you point out here. But we're also stronger than that, and we can change the influence of those factors if we live a divine life. Nothing can touch us. I will, in the different context, I will evoke the story of Rabbi Akiva's daughter. Rabbi Akiva's daughter was a woman who apparently, according to a dream that Rabbi Akiva had, was supposed to die on the night of her wedding. Rabbi Akiva had a dream that she would die then. Now, of course, he didn't tell her about this dream. It would just frighten her, and maybe for nothing. But the day after the wedding, immediately he goes and visits his daughter. He wants to see if this dream came true. And he came into her house, and she was there, alive. And he said to himself, well, how could that be then, that I had this dream? So he walks around the house, and he sees that just above the bed, there was a dead snake that she had killed with a hairpin. The night of her wedding, she went home. She, of course, took out the pins of her head, stuck the pin inside the wall. Then there was no electricity. And without noticing, she killed the snake that was creeping on the wall. And Rabbi Akiva said to himself, oh, my dream was a true dream. The snake was probably there to kill her. But she must have done something that is just incredibly good, that this decree was annulled. So he asked his daughter, is there any special mitzvah you did during your wedding day? And his daughter said, I don't know, nothing. And he persisted. And she said, well, yeah, at our wedding last night, I noticed that there were many guests, but also noticed that there was a beggar who seemed very hungry that came. And no one was paying attention to him. He was a beggar. So I went and I gave him my portion of food. And Rabbi Akiva concluded, he said, oh, that's why you were saved from death. I had this dream. You were supposed to die last night. But you allied yourself with God's mitzvah. And again, you fought, you were stronger than that decree, and those things that may shape us because of that special mitzvah. He concluded also, tzedakah tatzil mimavet, that charity can save a person from death. But it's not just charity. Each time we act divine, we go above the decrees of this world, above nature. And we can therefore overcome any influences from those factors like numbers, like astrological signs, like the birth date, like the days of the week in which we are born, and so on and so forth. So that's to answer that question. Okay.
So Rabbi, I always have a problem with this because, like, if twins are born, so shouldn't they be the same? I mean, so why are they different?
I mean, they could have the same influences, but there's a lot of things that compose the human being, not just the day the person was born. The personality that God gives each of us is also a factor. So they are different maybe in many ways, but they're also the same maybe in other ways, in the influences that stem from the days of the week. And you're right, maybe those astrological signs and so on are not as influential as we may think they are.
Yeah, it's always bothered me, but
yeah.
So everybody born on the same day should be the same, kind of.
Well, no, they shouldn't be the same. They shouldn't be the same. They could be influenced by maybe the same ideas, but of course, there's so much to the human being. You know, as a kid, I liked doing puzzles. You have 1,000-piece puzzles. You have 5,000-piece puzzle. I think the human being is like 1 trillion pieces puzzle. There's a lot of things that make the human being. So we're talking here about a few pieces of the puzzle. There's so many other things that contribute to what makes us who we are. And therefore, the twins are different because it's not just astrological signs that make us who we are.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about these influences of astrology and all these different things. And I'm wondering what other, I would say, influential or famous people in our history, how they might have reacted to those things. Take, for example, like someone like Maimonides. Did was there a conflict between what Maimonides might assume and what Kabbalistic people might assume?
I don't think so. I think everyone is of that agreement, of that conclusion that the Talmud presents. Everyone agrees with the conclusion that on the one hand, yes, we can be influenced by all sorts of other factors, but on the other hand, we can also be stronger than them.
Okay.
We see that at the very beginning of our history as Jews. If you believe that the first Jew was Abraham, even though I don't know if that's true, but Abraham himself was told by God, "Tzeh achutza," come outside of your tent and go and count the stars, and this is how your descendants will be. Rashi, the foremost commentary, says that God was telling Abraham not just to go out of his tent, but he was telling Abraham, "Tzeh ma'astagninut shelcha," come out of your astrological influences. You're stronger than that, Abraham. You think you can't have children? You think you won't have descendants that will be as numerous as the stars of the heavens? If you come out of your confines of nature, you'll see that you can overcome them, and you'll be Av la'amon goim netaticha, father of many nations, as God tells him. So we see this notion even at the very beginning of time. Okay, all right, and there's many other examples. Okay. Let's
Rabbi, can I just add something?
Yes, please.
You're making me think that when I first started studying in psychology, one of the first things they put on the board was the map is not the territory. It's a very famous saying by someone named Korzybinski, and it just came to my mind for some crazy reason.
Right. Mm-hmm.
What you said, you have to come out.
Right.
And be in life. The map is not what it's about.
That's
and
right.
that was one of my most favorite teachings, and one of the first that the professor wrote on the board. And
Very
when
good.
you're talking about this, that popped into my mind.
Very good. Very good. I mean, to go on a lower level than the Talmud and Abraham and so on. But I mean, the examples are many in history. People would have followed what others would have told them. They would have never become who they became. The Beatles were told that they have no future in the music industry. Albert Einstein was told that he's slow. Oprah Winfrey was told she would never fit. She's too fat. She would never fit in the TV screen. And J.K. Rowling was told that Harry Potter is worth nothing. And she went to 13 publishing houses to try and publish that book. So the end examples go on. And Steve Jobs was fired from his own company. I mean, I can think of thousands of examples. We are stronger than that. We are stronger than those confining influences. Okay, all right. Let's go to the next question here. Dear Rabbi, I know we say halal a few times a year. Can you talk about this? So you're right. So there is a prayer called halal, which is recited on holidays. Hanukkah, we recite the halal too, each and every day of Hanukkah. Halal is a prayer of gratitude, in which we express our gratitude to Hashem for the miracles that we experience. Every holiday usually represents a miracle. Passover is the miracle of the splitting of the Red Sea and the grand exodus from Egypt. Purim celebrates the miracle of the extermination of Haman and the annulment of his final solution decree. And Hanukkah celebrates the victory of a small band of Jews, the Maccabees, over the Greeks. So every miracle, every holiday is its miracle, and we are grateful, of course, for God's miracle, and therefore we recite the Hallel. I mentioned Purim, and in fact, it's a mistake, because Purim, we don't say Hallel. Just saying Purim is in the context of every holiday as a miracle attached to it. But what's interesting is that on Purim, we don't say Hallel, even though we ought to be saying Hallel. We ought to be grateful. We are grateful in other ways on Purim, but we don't say Hallel. And why? It's interesting to note that's because Hallel is only recited for miracles that occurred in the land of Israel. And So you can ask, well, on Passover, we say Hallel for the miracle of the Grand Exodus. Well, it's connected to Israel because that's what led us to the Promised Land. So, but Purim happened in Iran, in Persia, and therefore we do not say Hallel. Why? And that's because we're almost transforming our silence into a prayer. Our silence of not saying Hallel is a prayer, attaches itself to the prayers for God's ultimate redemption, saying, God, we can't be fully grateful for this miracle because we weren't in our land. And you know, God, that the Jewish people can only be their full selves, their full grateful selves when we're in the land of Israel. So return us to the land. It's time that Mashiach comes. That silence attaches itself to that ultimate prayer. But otherwise, again, Hallel is a prayer of gratitude, and therefore we recite it almost every holiday to express our gratitude to God. I will say another thing, that Hallel is a combination really of Psalms, Psalms by King David. And it's Psalm 114 to Psalm 118. That's what Hallel is. And we evoke the words of King David because those are the words that he composed when he overcame his enemies. So we attach our gratitude to his gratitude for overcoming his enemies, because usually that's what those holidays are about. Like the old Jewish line says, that they came to destroy us, we beat them, now let's eat. Well, there's one part missing. We beat them, let's say Hallel, now let's eat. And just like King David's story, he had many enemies, overcame them, he said Hallel, and I don't know if he ate afterwards or not. Certainly didn't eat gefilte fish. I'm sorry to tell all the Ashkenazic Jews out there. Okay, that's Hallel. Fine. Next question. What does Judaism say about getting rid of our ego? As hard as I try, it keeps coming back. I have meditated, fasted, taken vows of silence, but after years of work, my ego is still there. So it's a good question. I'm going to give you two answers. Answer number one is that the ego in and of itself is not so bad. I think we all need a little bit of ego. Even the greatest sages, the Talmud teaches us, needs shminit shebashminit, a 16th of ego. Because as the Lubavitcher Rebbe so beautifully put it, when he asked a question about Mount Sinai, because the Midrash famously says that Mount Sinai was chosen as the mountain on which God gave us the Torah, because all the mountains came to God saying, God, you should give the Torah on me. The tallest mountain said, I'm the tallest, give the Torah on me. The prettiest mountain said, I'm the prettiest, give the Torah on me. There was one mountain that was very low and had no special qualities, so it kept quiet. So God said, I'm going to teach them the trait of humility, and therefore I'm going to give the Torah on Mount Sinai. Lubavitcher Rebbe asks the question, well, God wanted to teach us the trait of humility. He should have given the Torah in a valley, not a mountain. Mountain is so high. And he answers so brilliantly. He says, no, if you're a valley, everyone will be stepping on you. And we as Jews need to be confident about our Torah, about what we stand for. We need to be mountains. Yes, we can't be arrogant. We can't be the tallest mountain, but we have to have some healthy self-esteem. And therefore the Torah wasn't given in a valley, but rather on a mountain to teach us that power of the healthy self-esteem, which is a little bit connected to ego. And therefore don't get rid of your ego entirely. Keep that mountain going. Stand for your principles, for your Jewish values, for your Jewish identity. It's needed in our world today. As we mentioned many times, the world will only respect Jews who respect themselves. Therefore, we need to be mountains. Don't get rid of your ego entirely. But I will say this. I'm of the opinion, which is really the opinion of Rabbi Shnilzan, of Liadi, and the Tanya, and that is that the more we think about our ego, the more our ego will swell. The less we think about our ego, the more we can get rid of our ego in a healthy way. Now, why am I saying that? Because where does that ego come from? It comes from self-preoccupation. Children don't have ego. Children are as flexible as it gets. Why? Because they're not preoccupied with themselves. They're preoccupied with life. They're busy living. Let me run to the next game. Let me run to the next. They're not preoccupied with themselves. So therefore, they don't have to work too much on the ego. The more we grow, the more we preoccupied with our bills, with our mortgage, with our kids, with our carpooling, with our diaper changing, with our whatever it may be. And we said to ourselves, oh, okay, life is miserable. Well, that's because you're only talking about yourself. So the less you focus on your ego, the more you can get rid of it. And it's almost like a wound. The more you play with it, the more it will expand. The more you just leave it alone, the better it will be. And I want to quote again the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who once a famous story about a woman who was diagnosed as a narcissist, and she didn't know what to do. And as she came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Lubavitcher with a medical file, and Lubavitcher Rebbe looked at the file. He was a speed reader. He looked at it and read every paper very quickly. And he returned it to her and he said, what do you want me to do with this? She said, well, I'm a narcissist. I came to ask for some remedy, a blessing, something. The Rebbe said, well, that's what they say. What are you right now at this moment? I'm still a narcissist. No, you decide what you want to be at this moment, the Rebbe told her. Now, if you ask me, go start and visit the sick or do something good for someone else and make that a habit. And slowly but surely, whatever they say about you won't exist anymore because you've decided to take control of every moment of your life and not live based on what they tell you. Now, it's easier said than done, but I do believe that what the Rebbe was saying is that be other preoccupied, not self-preoccupied. The more you're other preoccupied, the less problems you'll have with your ego. Quote, speaking almost a similar story, but it's a fascinating story. By the way, it's on YouTube and it's also written down. Told by a guy who experienced it. The guy who experienced it, his name is Meshulam Weiss. Meshulam Weiss was many years ago, was a groom to be married to a beautiful bride. And just before their wedding, they went again to the late Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson of blessed memory, to ask for a blessing. And during the private audience, the bride tells Meshulam, her groom, do you mind leaving the room? I have something very private to share with the Rebbe. I don't want you here. Fine. He leaves the room. After about 20 minutes, he's called back in. The Rebbe gives them a blessing for a happy marriage, a happy life, many children, and they go away. They get married. Shortly thereafter, Meshulam tells his wife, remember you kicked me out of the room when we met the Rebbe? Why did you kick me out? What did you want? And his wife tells him, Meshulam, I actually wanted to cancel the wedding. Meshulam says, you wanted to cancel the wedding? Yeah, I asked the Rebbe whether I should. But I wanted to cancel the wedding. It's got nothing to do with you, Meshulam. I want to cancel the wedding because of me. I have a temper. And I knew that I can't control my temper. So I asked the Rebbe whether I should cancel this wedding, knowing that my temper will destroy this marriage. The Rebbe smiled, she said, and he said, don't you worry. You'll have many children, and I'll teach you patience. And eventually your temper will go away. And until you have children, you should go and visit the sick. And that will also help you. What's interesting is the sequel to the story. And that is that decades later, this woman went for a checkup at her OBGYN post-menopause. And this OBGYN was new and he's looking at her results and etc. And he says to her, I see you're a religious woman. You must be very sad. She says, why? He says, because you have an infertile womb. So it's impossible for you to have children. Religious Jews, I know, like to have children. So you must be very sad. Now, she did not tell him that by that point, she had had 17 children. 17 children. So she went home and told Meshulam, look, you're going to get a good laugh out of this. But the doctor thinks that we don't have children because I have an infertile womb. Meshulam Weiss responded, you know what, it is funny, but it's amazing. because we thought the Rebbe gave us advice for your temper. Through his advice, he also gave us a blessing. He said, we'll have many children, they'll teach us patience. It wasn't just a piece of advice, it was a blessing that went against nature. And that was the power of the Rebbe. But I'm saying this because, again, that's another way to deal with the ego, by not dealing with it. Okay, and rather focusing on the other. Okay, next question. I believe this is the last question for tonight. And then we can open this up. Is it true that there is a special way to tie your shoelaces according to Jewish law? If yes, what's the right way? But my deeper question is, where is the great moral lesson in that? Does God really care? Am I a better person if I tie my shoes in a special way? So it's a great question. First of all, let me relate to question number one. How do you tie your shoelaces? Yes, according to Jewish law, you first have to put your right shoe on, then you put your left shoe on, then you tie your left shoe, and then you tie the shoelaces of your right shoe, so that you begin with the right and you end with the right. This is, by the way, Jewish law, nonetheless, founded on Kabbalah, like many Jewish laws. By the way, it proves the point that Kabbalah is not a separate section from Judaism, but it's part and parcel of Jewish law, of the way we act as Jews day in and day out. It's the spirit of the law. But it's based on Kabbalah that teaches that the right side is the side of kindness, the left side is the side of justice, and we always want to begin and end things with kindness. And therefore, we begin with the right side. Now, relating to your second question, where's the great moral lesson in that? Does God really care? Am I a better person if I tie my shoes in a special way? I think the great moral lesson is in this big idea. And that is that God does not just belong to the synagogue. God does not just belong to the house of study. God does not just belong in books. God does not just belong in rituals. God does not just belong in ceremonies. And God does not just belong in our lighting of our Chanukiah tonight. God belongs even in your shoes. God belongs even in your bedroom. God belongs even in your kitchen. God belongs even in the way you sleep, the way you eat, the way you tie your shoelaces. God is everywhere. That's the message of Judaism. I think that's one of the great tragedies of American Jewry, that we've relegated God to the synagogue. Oh, when we come to the synagogue, our God is there, or to the rabbi. But to own our Judaism and to own our godliness, no, that's not something that crosses our mind too often. But here comes Judaism and says, I'm sorry, that God that you think only lives in the synagogue also lives in your shoes. And therefore, you have to be cognizant of how you behave in every detail of your life, even when you put on your shoes. And I think that when we have this idea that God is truly everywhere, and he watches us at every moment, and he pays attention to every detail, then we become better people. We become more accountable. We become more divine. You know, there's a guy from our community that some of you may know who was an alcoholic for many, many years. And thank God he's been sober for 20 years now, over 20 years. He's a remarkable human being. And he told me that the best advice he ever received from his Alcoholic Anonymous mentor was at the beginning when he was having relapses and trying to overcome his addiction to alcohol. And this advice by his mentor was that before he enters a room, if he has to go to a party, he has to go to a social event in which he knows there's alcohol there, then before he enters the room, he should open the door, wait a few seconds, allow God to first come in, and then he can go in after it. Why? Because by allowing him, just by the little pause and allowing God to come in first, it will reinforce in his mind that God is in that room. If God is in that room, he'll think twice before drinking alcohol. And I think that, by the way, I see this in my children myself. I think that the genius of teaching them to say blessings before eating is not so much in the blessing, but it's in this idea that they actually have to pause before jumping on that chocolate. Teaches them the art of self-control. And I think that's the genius of having Judaism tell us how to put our shoelaces on. Does it make you a better person? Absolutely. Does God really care? Absolutely, because he wants a relationship with you, not just in the synagogue, even when you tie your shoelaces. So it's certainly a small step for man And no pun intended, it is a step for man, but a giant step for mankind, to quote Armstrong. It's a giant step. It's something giant that really influences our lives in the most wondrous ways.